In the 13th century, cities didn't fall. They vanished. Entire populations disappeared overnight. Survivors spread one message across continents: the Mongols are coming. This is the story of how a man born with nothing created the deadliest empire in human history and why. Fear itself became his greatest weapon. Before we go any further, pause for a second. Where are you watching this from? What country? What city? What corner of the world? Drop it in the comments. If stories like this matter to you, stories that explain how our world was shaped by blood, ambition, and power, then subscribe right now. Kosk, this isn't just history. This is how the world learned fear. Now, let's go back. Back to a frozen land where survival itself was a war. The Mongol steppe was not kind. It never had been. This vast, endless land of grass and ice stretched across Central Asia like an open wound. No walls, no cities, no safety, only wind, hunger, and death. Winters were brutal enough to kill entire families. Summers brought droughts that wiped out herds, the only source of life. Here, children learned one lesson early: you survive or you disappear. There were no kings here. No palaces. Only tribes constantly fighting, constantly raiding, constantly betraying one another. And into this world, around the year 1162, a child was born who was not supposed to matter. His name was Temujin. No prophecy announced his arrival. No sign in the sky. No destiny whispered by priests. He was born to a minor clan leader, Yasug, and a mother named Helen who, herself, had been kidnapped from another tribe. Violence, even at birth, surrounded him. But Temujin's life didn't start with power. It started with loss. When Temujin was still a boy, his father was poisoned by rival Tatars during a feast. Just like that, his protection was gone. The tribe didn't mourn. They didn't protect the widow. They didn't honor the dead leader's son. They abandoned Temujin, his mother, and his siblings, left them behind to die. In the steppe, weakness was contagious, and abandonment was mercy. Helen refused to let her children disappear. She gathered roots, wild plants, bones, anything to feed them. Temujin hunted birds and small animals with crude weapons. Hunger became permanent. Cold became normal. This wasn't childhood. This was training, and it did something to Temujin. It burned one belief into his mind: no one saves you. Power is the only protection. Scarcity doesn't just create hunger, it creates violence. Temujin and his half-brother Begtar fought constantly over food. One day, that fight crossed a line. Temujin killed him. Not in a battlefield, not in honor, but because survival demanded it. In the steppe, morality didn't matter. Survival did. This was the first blood Temujin spilled. It wouldn't be the last. The tribe that abandoned him didn't forget him. They returned one day not to help, but to capture. Temujin was chained, enslaved, paraded as a warning. This was the end for most men. But Temujin didn't accept cages. He waited, watched, learned. One night, he escaped, knocking out a guard hiding in a river, breathing through reeds while men hunted him with torches. That moment mattered, because from then on, Temujin understood something critical. Fear could be used. Chaos could be controlled. As he grew, Temujin made a choice that would change history. He rejected the steppe's oldest rule: loyalty to bloodlines. Instead, he chose loyalty based on ability. If you were strong, intelligent, disciplined, you had a place. If you betrayed him, you died. Slowly, followers gathered, not because of his name, but because of his clarity. He rewarded loyalty. He punished betrayal. He remembered everything, and people noticed. Temujin wasn't alone. His childhood friend, Jamuka, rose alongside him. They shared dreams, shared battles, shared ambition. but they believed in different worlds. Jamuka believed power belonged to noble bloodlines. Kujin believed power belonged to those who earned it. Their split was inevitable. When they became enemies, the steppe split with them. And when Jamuka chose tradition, Temujin chose revolution. Temujin didn't fight like others. He broke armies into units of tens, hundreds, thousands, based on discipline, not tribe. He used speed instead of walls, mobility instead of defense. Every warrior carried multiple horses, switching mounts mid-battle. They could ride for days without stopping. They attacked when enemies slept. They retreated to lure armies into traps. They struck from multiple directions at once. This wasn't chaos. This was systematic destruction. Temujin understood something most rulers never did. Killing armies wins battles. Killing hope wins wars. Cities that resisted were annihilated. Men, women, children slaughtered. Cities that surrendered were spared. Survivors were released intentionally. Why? To spread stories. To exaggerate the horror. To make future enemies surrender without fighting. Fear traveled faster than horses. In 1206, Temujin stood before the assembled Mongol tribes. For the first time in history, they were united. He was given a new name, Genghis Khan, ruler of all who live in felt tents. This wasn't a title, it was a warning. The steppe was no longer divided, and the world beyond it had no idea what was coming. To the south lay China. To the west, wealthy Islamic cities. To the far edges of Europe, kingdoms that had never heard his name. They would. Soon, because the Mongols were no longer just survivors. They were an engine of conquest, and fear itself was riding at the front. The tribes were united. The armies were disciplined. The strategy was perfected. All that remained is the world. Now buckle up, because we are entering the world of Genghis Khan, where cities will burn. Empires will collapse in weeks, okay? And humanity will meet a force it has never faced before. The Mongols did not announce their arrival. There were no envoys riding ahead with declarations of war. No flags on the horizon. No warning bells ringing in distant cities. One season, the world was normal. Trade caravans crossed deserts. Markets were full of life. Empires argued over borders. The next season, silence. Caravans failed to return. Messengers vanished between cities. Border villages burned down and were never rebuilt. At first, rulers blamed bandits. Then they blamed drought. Then they blamed rumors. But the rumors grew teeth. Because the survivors who staggered into nearby towns all told the same story, despite coming from different places, speaking different languages, and surviving different attacks. They said the enemy didn't come from one direction. They said they came from everywhere at once, and every single survivor repeated the same words, often while shaking, often while crying. The Mongols are coming. To the south of the Mongol steppe lay northern China, ruled by the Jin dynasty. It was not weak. It was not unprepared. This was a civilization with massive cities, professional armies, brilliant engineers, powerful siege weapons, and walls that had stood for centuries. Chinese generals believed walls were a permanent solution. They believed nomads could not breach stone. They were wrong. Genghis Khan did not rush blindly into China. He studied it. Captured soldiers were questioned for every detail. Engineers were spared and put to work. Defectors were rewarded with status and wealth. Every weakness was noted, every strength recorded. Then, the Mongols struck. Their attacks didn't follow any known patterns. They didn't concentrate on one city at a time. Instead, they split into columns, striking simultaneously across vast distances. Cities that expected weeks of warning found Mongol armies at their gates overnight. Villages simply vanished. Supply lines were severed before anyone knew they were under attack. Relief armies sent to help were ambushed and destroyed before they even knew what they were responding to. Walls that had protected generations of people now trapped them inside. When resistance continued, the Mongols did not negotiate. They erased. Entire populations were slaughtered not in moments of uncontrolled rage, but as a deliberate and calculated message. Craftsmen and engineers were always separated and spared. Everyone else was killed. Not because the Mongols hated them, but because future cities needed to hear what happened to those who resisted. Fear began spreading faster than any army could march. Cities started opening their gates without a fight. The Mongols were learning something vital. They could conquer more land with terror than they ever could with swords. To outsiders, the Mongol invasions looked like pure chaos. They were anything but. Every unit had a strict structure. Every commander had absolute authority. Every soldier understood the rules. Disobedience meant death. Cowardice meant death. Betrayal meant death. But loyalty brought rewards that were unimaginable on the steppe. Men rose through the ranks based on skill, not on birth. A simple shepherd could find himself commanding thousands of warriors. A former slave could be put in charge of planning entire invasions. This created a level of absolute devotion that no other army could match. Because in Genghis Khan's army, ability was survival, and survival was everything. In the year 1218, Genghis Khan turned his attention west. Beyond the deserts lay the Khwarezmian Empire, a massive power stretching across Central Asia. It was rich, urbanized, and confident. Its cities were world-renowned, centers of trade, science, and learning. Genghis Khan didn't want war, he wanted trade. He sent a caravan of merchants with a clear and simple message: peaceful relations and open trade routes. The Khwarezmian governor responded by arresting the merchants, accusing them of being spies. He had them all executed. When Genghis Khan sent official diplomats, men protected by ancient and sacred law, to demand justice, the Khwarezmian Shah ordered their heads shaved, their beards cut off, and then had them killed as well. In the medieval world, killing envoys was an unforgivable act. This wasn't diplomacy. This was a declaration of war. Genghis Khan did not scream. He did not threaten. According to the chronicles, he climbed a mountain alone, looked to the sky, and said, "I am the punishment of God." What followed would redefine warfare forever. In 1219, Mongol armies crossed into Khwarezmian territory. The Shah expected a single invasion route, and he prepared his defenses accordingly. But Genghis Khan split his forces. Multiple armies crossed deserts that were believed to be impassable. Cities that thought they were safe suddenly saw Mongol banners appear where no army should have been able to travel. The effect was devastating. Bukhara fell first. The Mongols breached the city walls, gathered the entire population, and slaughtered them almost completely. Genghis Khan reportedly addressed the survivors in the city's main mosque right before the massacre, making sure they understood exactly why this was happening to them. Samarkand was next. One of the greatest and wealthiest cities on earth collapsed in just a few days. The city of Urgench resisted fiercely. The Mongols erased it from existence. The destruction was so total, so absolute, that for generations afterward, people debated whether the city had ever truly existed at all. Survivors were released deliberately. This wasn't an act of mercy, it was a strategic move. They carried the story west, and the story became a weapon. By now, the Mongols rarely needed to fight full battles. Cities surrendered at the mere rumor of their approach. Garrisons abandoned their posts and fled. Rulers abdicated their thrones and ran before a single Mongol soldier was even seen. Fear became the Mongols' most effective weapon. They understood something ancient, but rarely used so deliberately. The mind breaks long before the body does. Some cities were spared to create a stark contrast. Others were destroyed to reinforce the terror. The uncertainty itself was terrifying. No one knew which choice, surrender or resistance, would save them. As the armies pushed into Persia, the Islamic world shuddered. It had never seen destruction on this scale. Persian historians wrote of entire rivers clogged with corpses. They described libraries burning for weeks, and entire scholarly traditions being erased overnight. To them, the Mongols were not human. They were described as demons, as a divine punishment, as the end of civilization itself. But behind the horror, there was a chilling discipline. Looting was strictly regulated. Orders were enforced without question. The chaos was controlled. This wasn't blind violence. It was calculated domination. European armies marched. Mongol armies flowed. They carried dried meat and fermented milk in saddlebags, needing no long supply trains. They could live off the land. Each warrior maintained a string of multiple horses, switching mounts mid-journey to keep their pace relentless. This allowed Mongol forces to move at speeds no army in history had ever matched. They could strike a target, vanish, and then strike again hundreds of miles away before their enemies even knew what had happened. Enemy commanders never knew where the Mongols were. They only knew where they had been. In 1223, the legendary Mongol generals Subutai and Jebe encountered the combined armies of the Rus princes near the Khalkha River. The Rus believed they had the invaders cornered. They outnumbered them significantly. So when the Mongols retreated, the Rus pursued. For days, they chased the seemingly fleeing army. And then the trap closed. The Mongols turned, and in a single, brutal engagement, they annihilated them. The captured princes were executed, slowly crushed to death beneath wooden boards during a victory feast, while the Mongol leaders ate and celebrated above them. While they were still alive, this wasn't cruelty for pleasure. It was a demonstration. Europe had been warned. Despite the empire's incredible growth, Genghis Khan did not retreat into a life of luxury. He remained mobile, living in a yurt just like his soldiers. He listened to his advisors. He punished incompetence without mercy. He rewarded loyalty beyond imagination. He outlawed kidnapping. He protected religious freedom for all faiths. He established a written code of law that applied to everyone, including his own family. This wasn't chaos. This was a new world order, forged through violence and fire. By the early 1220s, the known world had changed forever. Empires that had stood for centuries collapsed in a matter of years. Old trade routes were abandoned, and new ones rerouted under Mongol control. Fear was the one thing that now connected continents. Kings prayed, scholars debated, merchants fled. And still, the Mongols did not stop. They paused, they regrouped, they prepared. Because the greatest question of all remained unanswered. What happens when the deadliest empire ever created loses its creator? From China to Persia, the world lay broken. Fear traveled faster than armies, and the Mongols stood unmatched. But the man who created this storm was aging, and his death when it came would be wrapped in silence. The steppe was united. China was broken. Persia was erased. Even the princes of Russia had learned to fear the shadows of Mongol horses. Yet Genghis Khan, the man who had carved the world into fear, was growing old. Not even a storm can last forever. By the 1220s, his health was failing. Chronic wounds from battles, countless nights exposed to the cold, and relentless travel had worn him down. But he remained a symbol, a godlike figure who could command millions with a single glance. His empire stretched farther than any had ever dreamed. From the icy rivers of Siberia to the deserts of Central Asia, from the Mongolian steppes to the gates of China. And yet, the world had not fully seen the Mongol shadow. Genghis Khan's final years were not spent in leisure. He planned the ultimate consolidation of his empire. In 1226, he prepared for a campaign against the Western Xia dynasty, a Chinese state that had resisted him for decades. The Western Xia had grown wealthy and proud. They had rebuilt their fortresses. They had ignored his warnings. Genghis Khan moved swiftly, personally leading an army across treacherous mountains and rivers. The speed, coordination, and ruthless efficiency of the Mongol army were unmatched. They cut off supply lines, raided villages for intelligence, and encircled cities with terrifying precision. The Western Shaya could not withstand the onslaught. Cities fell in weeks. Entire populations were executed. Libraries, temples, and fortresses were destroyed. Survivors fled into the mountains, spreading stories of a man whose armies seemed unstoppable, a man whose fury could not be reasoned with. It was about leaving a legacy written not just in maps, but in the hearts of all who survived. In the year 1227, after decades of war, Genghis Khan fell ill during the Western Shaya campaign. The exact cause of his death remains shrouded in mystery. Some say he was injured in battle. Others claim he succumbed to illness or exposure. A few legends whisper that he was betrayed by someone within his own court. Whatever the truth, the Khan died quietly, far from the eyes of the world he had conquered. His burial was kept secret. The location of his grave remains unknown to this day. Even his closest generals were forbidden from revealing it. The Mongol world trembled, but the empire did not collapse. Despite his death, the Mongol war machine continued its relentless march. Genghis Khan had not built an empire based on fear alone. He had created systems, laws, and leaders trained in his methods. His sons and generals spread his influence even further. Genghis Khan consolidated China and expanded into Korea. Chagatai Khan ruled Central Asia with an iron hand. Jochi and Batu led campaigns westward, preparing the empire's march toward Europe. The Mongols became a living force, able to move thousands of miles in weeks, crushing armies and cities alike. The Mongol threat eventually reached the doorstep of Eastern Europe. Kingdoms like Hungary, Poland, and the Rus principalities were completely unprepared for the speed, coordination, and brutality of the Mongols. In 1241, just over a decade after Genghis Khan's death, his grandson, Batu Khan, led the invasion of Europe. Cities burned. Cavalry swept across the plains. Even mighty castles designed to withstand long sieges could not endure the psychological terror of Mongol tactics. Europeans had never seen a force that could attack simultaneously on multiple fronts, communicate with such efficiency, and devastate entire regions in months instead of years. The shadow of Genghis Khan's strategy, years after his death, was still the most terrifying weapon on earth. The Mongol Empire would eventually fragment. Borders shifted, dynasties rose and fell. Yet the imprint of Genghis Khan remained permanent. He left behind military innovations, mobile armies, disciplined units, and strategic intelligence networks. He created political systems with merit-based leadership, religious tolerance, and legal codes that outlived generations. He secured trade networks, allowing the Silk Road to flourish under Mongol protection, which enabled the exchange of goods, ideas, and technology across continents. From architecture to diplomacy, the Mongol method reshaped societies far beyond the steppe. Even today, modern genetics reveal the vast reach of his lineage. Millions of men carry DNA that traces back to Genghis Khan. His empire may have fallen, but his presence in the world never disappeared. Genghis Khan was not merely a conqueror. He was a revolutionary of human psychology. He understood fear. He understood loyalty. He understood that a man who could survive the steppe could survive anything, but only if he had both: discipline and belief in a larger purpose. His campaigns were not chaotic slaughter. They were psychological warfare, logistics mastery, and strategic brilliance combined into one unstoppable force. The world learned lessons it would not forget. Walls alone do not protect against strategy. Fear can be a weapon stronger than steel. Discipline can outmatch numbers every time. Survival depends not on luck, but on adaptability. The story of Genghis Khan is more than history. It is a lesson in power, fear, ambition, and resilience. It shows how one man, born into nothing, can reshape continents. It demonstrates that strategy can surpass brute force, and that psychology can defeat entire armies. And yet, the ultimate mystery remains: where is his grave? What secrets were buried with him? And what lessons did the world forget till they were relearned centuries later? If you want to explore more stories that explain how the world was shaped by empires, fear, and strategy, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. Which empire should we explore next? The Roman Empire? The Persian Empire? Or another world-shaping power? We have 1 week dedicated to historical documentaries, chance to understand how humanity evolved through fear, power, and ambition. Your choice will guide our next story. Thanks for watching.